Ever get that feeling? Where you're like pouring your heart into something,
Yeah.
building something amazing, right? But then somewhere along the way, things change.
Yeah.
Like the goalposts move. It starts as this awesome team effort. Everyone's totally on the same page. But then it becomes more about, you know,
Who gets the credit?
exactly. Well, today's deep dive, we're going way back
Mhm.
to like the OG cautionary tale about ambition gone wrong, the Tower of Babel. We're diving into a sermon based on that whole story.
Oh,
But
interesting.
not just, rehashing what happened, but like really exploring what it says about pride, ambition, and uh, what real unity actually means.
What I find really interesting about this particular sermon is that it doesn't just like condemn all ambition, right?
Right.
It kind of recognizes that even the desire to achieve great things, like it can get twisted.
Yeah,
It can become more about, our ego than actually doing good.
totally. And that's where things get tricky, right?
Yeah.
Because ambition itself isn't like inherently bad. I mean, without ambition, would we even have progress?
Yeah.
Would we have innovation?
Yeah.
So how do we like separate healthy ambition from the kind that leads to, well, a whole lot of babbling and confusion?
Well, this sermon uses the Tower of Babel story as like a powerful example of that tension.
Yeah.
Remember how the story starts? Humanity's united, speaking the same language, working towards this like common goal.
Okay.
That sounds pretty ideal.
On the surface, for sure.
Yeah.
It's like, imagine the potential if everyone was literally on the same page. But the sermon, it points out that even that unity, it could have been used to honor God,
Exactly.
but instead something changed.
It shifted.
Yeah.
And this is where it gets really interesting. The people, they declare, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens so that we may make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth. You hear that language?
Yeah.
Ourselves, a name for ourselves.
It's like their focus narrowed, right? Like from this huge world-changing project to basically a selfie in front of a really tall building.
a selfie.
But how does the sermon explain that shift? Was it like just all of a sudden everyone just decided to be jerks?
Uh-huh. Well, that's what's so insightful about this sermon. It doesn't, paint the people as like cartoon villains. It
Right.
suggests that pride was like the underlying current that was there all along.
Okay.
Subtly twisting their ambition. And the tower itself, it becomes a symbol of that pride.
Uh-huh.
This monument to, human achievement. It's like them saying, look at what we can do without God.
Okay, so they messed up big time.
Uh-huh.
But wasn't God's reaction a bit, I don't know,
Yeah.
over the top? Confusing languages and scattering everyone seems a little harsh, even for, a tower building offense.
Well, that's where the sermon gives us like a really interesting perspective.
Okay.
It suggests that what looks like punishment was actually, get this, an act of grace.
Whoa, okay.
This like, think of a parent, right? And they stop their child from, I don't know, touching a hot stove.
Yeah.
Seems mean in the moment,
Right.
but it prevents something way worse.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So God was basically saying, hold on, team, I love you too much to let you, keep going down this self-destructive path.
Exactly. The sermon says God disrupted their plans to remind them that they depend on him.
Okay.
Like a wake-up call,
Right.
a redirection.
Yeah.
Honestly, don't we all need that sometimes?
Definitely. I mean, we can get so caught up in our own plans, our own ambitions,
Yeah.
that we forget, who's really in control.
Yeah.
But how does this ancient story, relate to us today? I mean, we're not building actual towers to heaven, or are we?
Well, that's exactly the question this sermon wants us to grapple with.
Okay.
Are there towers that we build in our modern lives
Mm.
that reflect those same, like, pride-driven motives?
Oh, interesting.
Maybe it's, I don't know, that promotion you're going for,
Yeah.
or that perfect image we're always trying to, create online.
Or even, like, that dream house you're just, like, determined to buy.
Okay, but those things don't seem, inherently bad.
Right.
A nice house is a nice house.
Yeah, of course.
So how do we know when ambition crosses the line from, like, healthy striving
Yeah.
to, building our own personal Tower of Babel?
Well, the sermon says we need to look deeper than the surface, right?
Yeah.
To really examine, like, our motives.
Okay.
It's about asking yourself some tough questions, like, why is this goal so important to me? Am I just trying to impress people, or am I, like, really passionate about this?
Okay, that's where I get stuck.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I can tell the difference,
Yeah.
between real passion and just a bit of ego.
Right.
It all feels kind of mixed up sometimes.
And that's exactly why the sermon goes beyond just saying, pride is bad.
Yeah.
It gives us some practical ways to, figure out our motives.
Okay.
Like really figure out what's driving us.
All right, I'm all ears. What are these secret weapons of motive detection?
Well, the sermon points to a few things, but I think the most important one is honesty.
Honesty.
Yeah, not just with, other people, but with ourselves.
Oh, okay.
The sermon, it really stresses being, brutally honest about why we want the things we want.
Okay, so it's like holding up a mirror to your soul.
Right.
And being like, all right, spill it. What's the real motivation here?
Yeah.
But how do we even, start doing that?
Yeah.
It feels like those deeper motives, they can be so slippery, hard to get a grip on.
Absolutely. It's not easy.
Right.
But the sermon uses this helpful analogy.
Okay.
It compares our motives to the roots of a tree.
Oh, okay.
On the surface, you see the leaves, the branches,
Yeah.
all pretty and impressive. But what really defines the tree, it's the roots, right? What's going on underground.
So our outward ambitions are like the leaves and branches, but the real story is down in the roots.
Exactly.
Those hidden motivations.
Yeah, and the sermon gives us a few ways to sort of excavate those roots, right?
Yeah.
One is, like you said, honest self-reflection.
Yeah.
Take that goal you're working towards, that thing you're super ambitious about,
Mm-hmm.
and ask yourself, if I achieved this, but nobody knew about it, no recognition, no praise, would I still be happy?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would hesitate there.
Yeah.
It really makes you think about how much external validation
Mm-hmm.
is tied up in our ambition,
Right. And that's a clue that maybe pride is playing a bigger role than we want to admit.
Okay, so that's one way. What else?
Another way the sermon talks about is through prayer.
Okay.
Not just the, God, please help me get this promotion kind of prayer,
Right.
but a deeper, more honest conversation.
More like, God, help me understand why I even want this promotion so bad in the first place.
Exactly.
Is this about serving you, or am I just trying to build my own little tower here?
That's it. It's about inviting God into the process.
Right.
Asking him to, help us see clearly. And it's important to remember, God isn't intimidated by our ambition.
Yeah.
He created us with desires, the drive to achieve things.
It's not like he's up there keeping score of who's aiming too high,
Right.
zapping anyone who dares to dream big.
He wants us to use our gifts,
Yeah.
to thrive.
Yeah.
But the sermon reminds us that real fulfillment, that comes when our ambitions line up with his purpose.
So it's less about crushing ambition and more about
Yeah.
reorienting it,
Reorienting it. Yeah.
pointing it in the right direction.
That's a great way to put it. Think about the people at Babel, right?
Yeah.
They had massive ambition, crazy skills.
Literally moving mountains.
Literally,
Yeah.
yeah. But their motives were messed up.
Yeah.
And in the end, their efforts just led to chaos, confusion.
Which brings us back to the whole idea of unity.
Right.
This sermon, it contrasts the Babel kind of unity, the kind that's built on pride and self-reliance,
Yeah.
with true unity,
Yeah.
the kind that can only be found, in God.
Right.
But what does that even look like, practically speaking?
Yeah.
It sounds nice, but how do we actually live that out?
Well, the sermon talks about a few key things that make up God-centered unity.
Okay.
One is, humility.
Humility.
Recognizing that, we don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
We need each other.
Uh-huh.
And most importantly, we need God.
Right.
It's about letting go of the ego.
Yeah.
The need to always be right, the need to control everything.
That's a tough one.
It is.
Especially in a world that seems to reward the opposite,
Mhm.
being loud, assertive, always having to have the last word.
It totally does.
Yeah.
But the sermon says that real strength, real unity, it comes from that willingness to, lay down our pride,
Yeah.
to listen to others,
Even the people we disagree with.
especially the people we disagree with.
Right, because true unity isn't about everyone being clones of each other, right?
Yeah.
Thinking the exact same thoughts,
Right.
having the same opinion.
It's about finding that common ground,
Yeah,
that shared purpose, even when we see things differently.
exactly. And the sermon points to another crucial ingredient
Yeah.
for building that kind of unity. Forgiveness.
Forgiveness.
Because let's be real, we're all going to mess up sometimes.
Yeah.
We're going to hurt each other, misunderstand each other, build our own little metaphorical powers of Babel.
We've all been there.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm definitely guilty of that.
Yeah.
But you're saying forgiveness is the key too, like
Yeah.
untangling those messes
Yeah.
and actually moving forward together.
It's essential. I mean, without forgiveness, resentment builds up.
Right.
Walls go up.
And that's the opposite of unity.
Exactly. The sermon reminds us that forgiveness is a choice, not a feeling.
Okay.
It's about letting go of the anger, the hurt, and choosing to offer grace, even when it's hard.
So it's like choosing to tear down those walls instead of letting them divide us.
That's it.
Choosing unity over isolation, even when we've been hurt.
You got it. And, the sermon makes this interesting point about the power of forgiveness to transform relationships.
Oh, outside.
It says that when we forgive, it doesn't just, fix what was broken.
Yeah.
It actually opens up the door for deeper connection,
Really?
more understanding, more empathy.
So it's not just about, sweeping things under the rug and pretending everything's fine.
Right.
It's about using those moments of conflict, those Babel moments,
Yeah.
to actually grow closer.
Yeah.
To build, stronger, more authentic relationships.
Absolutely. And that leads us to another important element of God-centered unity.
Okay, what's that?
Communication.
Communication.
But not just any kind of communication, The sermon talks about, open and honest dialogue,
Okay.
respectful dialogue.
So not just, yelling our opinions at each other
Haha, no.
or trying to, win the argument.
It's about making a space where people feel safe sharing their thoughts, their feelings, even when they're totally different from our own.
Which is so hard, right?
It is.
Especially when we, feel really strongly about something.
Yeah.
It's almost like our instinct is to defend ourselves, Prove we're right.
Yeah.
But the sermon's saying that real unity requires us to, maybe set aside that need to be right.
Right.
And just focus on truly hearing each other.
Exactly. It's about choosing understanding over winning.
Yeah.
Connection over division.
Right.
And that's not easy.
No.
But it's at the heart of what it means to build a tower that really reaches towards heaven.
So it's like we're all bringing our own unique bricks, our own perspectives.
Yeah.
To create this, beautiful, diverse structure.
Yeah.
But the mortar that holds it all together,
Yeah.
that keeps it from becoming a chaotic mess like the Tower of Babel.
Right.
It's love, forgiveness, genuine communication.
That's a beautiful image.
Yeah.
And it reminds us that unity isn't a destination, it's a journey. It's something we got to keep working at, keep building, day by day.
Brick by brick.
Brick by brick, but the rewards, they're huge.
Because when you experience that kind of unity, that real God-centered unity,
Yeah.
it's not just about, getting along or avoiding conflict. It's
Right.
about connecting with something much bigger than ourselves.
You're right. And that brings us to another important takeaway from the sermon.
Okay, what is it?
It challenges us to think about the bigger picture,
Okay.
The sermon spends a lot of time on individual pride and ambition,
Uh-huh.
how those things can lead us astray.
Yeah.
But it also asks this really thought-provoking question. What about collective pride?
Collective pride.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's like zooming out
Yeah.
from the individual level to the societal level.
Exactly.
Asking ourselves, are we falling into the same trap as those Babel builders?
Yeah.
Just, on a much larger scale.
Exactly. And that's something we're going to dive into even deeper as we keep going.
Okay, cool.
So stay tuned because we're about to explore what this ancient story means for our world today.
So we're back. And we've been talking about this idea of, collective pride, right?
Mm-hmm.
How even as a whole society, we can fall into the same trap as those Babel builders.
Yeah.
Reaching for greatness, but with, the wrong motives.
Exactly.
What I find really interesting is the sermon doesn't give us a simple list of bad powers to avoid.
Yeah, it's not that straightforward.
It's more about looking at, the values and beliefs behind our ambitions, right? As a society, I mean.
That's it, yeah. It's about looking at the why.
Okay, so it's less about, pointing fingers at specific projects.
Right.
And more about asking, what are we actually trying to build? What's driving our progress?
Exactly. The sermon suggests we ask some tough questions like,
Okay, like what?
well, for example, when we think about technological advancement,
Yep.
is it driven by a genuine desire to, improve things for people?
Yeah.
Or is it more about power, control? Even this idea of a techno-utopia where, God's kind of left out.
I see what you mean. It's are we using technology to really connect with each other?
Right.
Or are we just creating more distractions
Yeah.
that actually isolate us, make us forget what's important?
That's one example. The sermon also talks about economic systems.
Oh, okay.
Are they set up to promote fairness, justice, to, care for those who are struggling?
Yeah.
Or are they built on greed, competition, just this like constant chase for profit, no matter who gets hurt?
It's like, are we building a tower of wealth that only benefits a few?
Exactly.
Or are we creating a system where everyone has a chance to thrive?
That's the question. And honestly, we can apply this to like every area of life. Yeah, think about politics, education, entertainment, even how we treat the environment.
Yeah.
Are we being responsible, or are we just consuming everything in sight? Building a tower of, unsustainable practices that'll eventually lead to, well, disaster.
It's a scary thought, right? Like, the Tower of Babel isn't just some ancient story.
Yeah.
It's a reflection of who we are, Like a warning about what happens when we let pride and ambition run wild.
And yet the sermon doesn't leave us in a place of hopelessness.
Okay, good.
It reminds us that God is still in control, that he can redeem even our biggest mistakes. Remember, the scattering at Babel,
Yeah.
it led to the diversity of languages and cultures we have today.
So even in our messes, even when we're driven by pride, God can bring something good out of it.
Exactly.
It's like he takes those broken bricks from our metaphorical towers
Right.
and builds something even better.
That brings us back to, aligning our ambition with God's purpose.
Right, both individually and as a society.
Exactly. It's about seeking his will.
Not our own.
Right. It's about building towers that actually reach towards heaven.
Not out of pride,
Yeah.
but out of like a genuine desire to serve God
Yeah.
and love our neighbor.
This has been quite a journey, hasn't it?
It really has.
Yeah.
We started with this simple story about a tower,
Yeah.
and we've ended up talking about like the nature of ambition,
Right.
the challenges of unity,
Yeah.
and how to build a world that truly reflects, God's heart.
And through it all, the sermon reminds us we're not alone in this. God is with us,
Yeah.
guiding us.
Even when we get off track.
Even when we get off track, he's the master architect, and
Yeah.
we get to work alongside him, building a world where love, justice, and unity win.
So, as we wrap up, let's remember the lessons of Babel,
Okay.
both the warnings and the hope.
Yeah.
Let's check our own motives, individually and together,
Right.
and make sure the towers we're building are like aligned with God's purpose.
Uh-huh.
Let's work for a unity that's rooted in humility, forgiveness, real communication.
Yes.
And let's never forget, even in our brokenness,
Yeah.
even in our pride, God can bring forth something beautiful.
Something that truly glorifies him.
Thanks for joining us on this climb up the Tower of Babel, everyone.
Yeah, thanks for listening.
We hope you've been challenged, inspired, and maybe even convicted a little bit.
Haha.
Until next time, keep seeking truth, keep building bridges, and keep your eyes on the one who holds it all together.